The fight over a flag. On this Martin Luther King Day, thousands march against what they see as a symbol of slavery. An advanced look at President Clinton's big new proposal to cut handgun violence. Plus, news about drastic weather now and what's to come. Hint, remember El Nino?
This is the CBS Evening News. With Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. As America paid tribute today to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his crusade for freedom and racial equality, there was a battle going on over what some see as a continuing symbol of racial oppression. On this federal holiday, Vice President Al Gore placed a wreath at the King tomb in Atlanta. During a memorial service at King's Ebenezer Baptist Church, his daughter Bernice called on all Americans to do their part to further the cause of freedom, justice, and equality. For many, that meant volunteering their time today to serve their communities. In Philadelphia, they painted schools. In Washington, President Clinton helped spruce up a computer lab at a Boys and Girls Club. Cities and towns all over America held parades in honor of Dr. King and the struggle for racial equality that continues to this day. Against this national background, there was a regional march today that overshadowed the celebration. CBS's Bill Whitaker was there.
The flag is down, we won't turn around till the flag is off the top.
It was the largest march Columbia, South Carolina had ever witnessed, the latest salvo in the divisive battle over the Confederate flag. A symbol of heritage to some, a symbol of hate to these marchers. More than 40,000 people, most African American, marched on the Capitol to press unfinished business. On this day honoring a man of peace, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., they called on legislators to pull down a banner of war, the Confederate flag flying above the State House.
It's a symbol of racism here in South Carolina.
We say, take the flag down.
The march was called by the NAACP, which has an ongoing boycott against this last state of the old Confederacy, still to so honor the flag.
We have come to this state capitol, standing beneath this Confederate flag, to say that we will continue to march and we will continue to boycott until it flies no more.
The battle lines are drawn. Recently, 6,000 flag supporters answered a call to arms on the same Capitol steps.
Any movement whatsoever would be a shameful move for the flag.
The flag hails from the 19th century, but the tradition of flying it over the state capitol started only in 1962, the centennial of the Civil War, and when the Civil Rights Movement was forcing change on the state. After years of stalemate, the governor says compromise now could be possible.
I think the ice is breaking. I see people who have not spoken of reconciliation and compromise in the past who are now beginning to talk in that manner.
But this controversy may not end until old times here truly are forgotten. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Columbia, South Carolina.
The flag flap and other racial issues have become part of the presidential campaign. The candidates are even talking about it heading into next week's caucuses in Iowa, a state in which racial minorities are comparatively few and far between. From Iowa, CBS's Cynthia Bowers is tracking this aspect of the race for the presidency. Cynthia?
Dan, it's safe to say the Republicans have been blindsided by this Confederate flag controversy. For the Republican candidates, the problem is that they cannot afford to alienate their core of conservative white voters, but they also want to appear open and more tolerant. That's why they're taking a benign states' rights stance and hoping this issue fades away.
I don't believe that this issue is going to, of the flag, is going to resonate to the detriment of my campaign or anyone else's, because I think most people understand that this issue should be decided by the people of South Carolina.
George Bush, too, is trying to avoid controversy. At the same time, he doesn't want to undermine his efforts to make his party more inclusive.
Well, I'm very clear. I haven't waffled from day one when I've been asked the question. That's a decision for the people of South Carolina to make.
For the Democrats, it is a fight for the black vote in states that come after Iowa and New Hampshire, like California, New York, and the southern states. And that's why today former Senator Bill Bradley was trying to outflag Vice President Al Gore.
It offends me. It should be taken down immediately and absolutely. And we should move forward, not look back, move forward.
Bradley is desperate to make a dent in Gore's African-American support, and that will be difficult given that support runs very deep. Particularly telling was Gore's presence today at the site of Coretta Scott King at her husband's memorial.
We must renew our commitment to build Dr. King's beloved community, overcome the forces of complacency, indifference, fear of difference, and the racial hatred that still embitters far too many human hearts.
For Democrats, the flag controversy only helps because in a general election that is likely to be close, it is their nominee who could get a boost from an issue on which the Republican candidate can't really afford to take a side. Dan?
Cynthia Bowers in Des Moines. There is news tonight from another election year battlefront and national problem, gun crimes and what to do about them. CBS News Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has learned the details of a new initiative by President Clinton to reduce gun crimes. John?
Dan, CBS News has learned that tomorrow the president will unveil the largest gun enforcement initiative in this country's history, a $280 million investment in the war against guns and violence. Under the proposal, which must be approved by Congress, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms would get 500 new agents to target violent gun criminals, illegal gun traffickers, and unscrupulous gun dealers. States would share 1,000 new state prosecutors and 100 federal prosecutors who would concentrate exclusively on gun crimes.
Well, I think an argument could be made that the numbers we're asking for are really just a down payment for that which we ultimately are going to need. But I do think the numbers that the president's talking about are very substantial, and I think can have a substantial impact on the gun violence problem.
The initiative builds on partnerships like Richmond, Virginia's Project Exile. Combining federal funding for gun enforcement with strict mandatory sentencing, Richmond has seen double-digit drops in the crime rate in each of the past 3 years.
If we keep pushing, we'll expect to see continued reductions, but a lot of that is dependent upon the resources that we get.
The announcement comes after years of criticism from Republicans and the National Rifle Association that Mr. Clinton prefers writing new laws to enforcing ones already on the books. At a gun show in Las Vegas today, the NRA came close to applauding the measure.
Until we take a hard look at exactly what the president's suggesting in his budget proposal, we have no idea whether he's really decided to enforce the existing laws or just make a political move.
The president will also propose new measures to trace guns used in crimes and new money to develop so-called smart technology, allowing only a gun's owner to use it. But he has also vowed to push ahead with legislation on gun control, a move that will keep him at odds with Republicans and the NRA. Dan?
John Roberts at the White House. Israel and Syria were supposed to resume their peace talks here in the United States this week, but the talks were postponed indefinitely today. CBS News has been told that President Clinton has decided to hold off until and unless the two sides can at least agree on what to talk about first. In Israel today, a pipe bomb exploded in a trash can, wounding 21 people. Most injuries were minor. The police said it was probably the work of Islamic militants trying to derail the peace process. Up next on the CBS Evening News, the Weather Watch, a plague of storms in the Pacific Northwest, a plague of drought in other U.S. regions, and is El Nino coming back? On the CBS Weather Watch, biting cold has swept into the Northeast. You couldn't tell from today's temperatures that up to now it's been a La Nina-driven winter of mild and dry weather in this region, the Northeast. In the Pacific Northwest, it's been one storm after another. The latest was one of the worst and windiest yet. But there is possible change in the air because of a possible new El Nino-type development forming up again far out in the Pacific. CBS's John Blackstone shows you what's happening now and what could be coming next.
Powered by La Nina, 100-mile-an-hour winds barreled in off the Pacific, knocking down trees and power lines in Oregon and Washington. One person was killed by a falling tree. Another died in an avalanche. It's the worst in a series of La Nina storms that have been rolling in on the Pacific Northwest for most of the winter.
Well, there's not much to measure left.
One of the wettest Joyce Houseman has seen in 35 years of recording the weather.
January 2nd, snow. January 3rd, snow.
In Seattle, La Nina has meant more than average rainfall in a place that's accustomed to getting wet.
It's never going to end. That's what it feels like.
Satellite images show La Nina, a huge pool of cold Pacific water, is still strong. But there's now an ominous hint the ocean is warming, And that could mean an early return of La Niña's more destructive counterpart, El Nino.
If it warms it a little bit, you know, we get to normal. If it warms it a lot, we call those El Ninos.
What concerns NASA oceanographer David Adamick is a tongue of warm water deep in the western Pacific.
The Pacific Ocean is definitely tell us, hey, watch this. We have potential here.
The last El Nino 3 years ago brought devastating floods and mudslides to California. Weather that's not just weird, but destructive. But for now, it's the cold waters of La Nina that are still shaping our weather. Well, that's meant a mild winter in much of the country. It just keeps bringing those storms off the Pacific to the already soaked Northwest.
I checked it this morning. There was...
Over the years, Joyce Houseman has seen plenty of rainy days.
Ooh, I'd say zillions. An awful lot.
But thanks to La Nina,
January 5th rain.
Her diary for this year,
January 7th rain,
is awfully repetitive.
January 9th snow and rain.
John Blackstone, CBS News, San Francisco.
January 10th snow and rain.
There are other parts of the country that desperately need rain. The U.S. government's latest drought map shows large areas ranging from abnormally dry to growing drought in darker colors. The impact zone includes some of this country's prime farmland, including that in California. And some of the deepest drought is deep in the heart of Texas already. CBS's Bob McNamara has been investigating there.
Far west Texas, the high desert, an unlikely place for this. It is an ancient underground spring believed hundreds of miles long, and for generations a lifeline for ranchers and wildlife. But today, almost 4 years into the current Texas drought, these rare and remote springs are drying up, and the results are alarming.
Golly, I don't see a lot of fish running around, do you?
Now, waters that once teemed with endangered fish flow at barely a trickle, and some desert wetlands that once looked like this are today a warning of how severe this drought is.
You can listen to the alarms going off or ignore them, but at some point it's going to be very alarming.
The drought threatens to cost Texas agriculture billions more than it has to date. Already this year, 75 counties are declared disaster areas because rain is so rare. Again, ranchers are selling off cattle. More than 70% of the state's pastures and ponds are bone dry.
If you ever get to the point where you're hauling water, you may as well sell cows.
It is the same drought that's drained the state's reservoirs to the lowest they've been in 22 years. And as levels keep dropping, the forecast offers no early hope for relief.
It looks like these La Nina conditions will persist at least through the winter and possibly into the spring.
They're all back there.
For Ingeborg Duncan now, no rain near San Angelo has seen her hobby of feeding deer turn into a mission of mercy.
There just isn't anything much out here for them now.
And more than a cycle of weather, it seems, drought has become a Texas way of life. Bob McNamara, CBS News, Balmorhea, Texas.
Next on CBS, the possibly dangerous chemical in your drinking water and how a government snafu helped get it there. There is new information tonight on a story CBS's Steve Croft investigated and reported last night on 60 Minutes. It centers on a gasoline additive called MTBE. It spells trouble for your drinking water. Your government kept it secret and did little about it. How bad is it? It could make you wonder about what's coming out of the tap and how it got there. Tonight, CBS's Jim Axelrod has facts and some more cases in point.
Methyl tertiary butyl ether, a mouthful to say. And now perhaps the country's greatest unfolding environmental challenge. This chemical added to gasoline for cleaner air is now polluting a great deal of the nation's drinking water.
Animal studies, it's been shown to cause cancer, unequivocally.
As reported on 60 Minutes last night, 21 states have had wells shut down due to MTBE groundwater contamination. Louis Saul is one of a number of lawyers now suing Big Oil on behalf of well owners.
We want cleanup if it can be cleaned up, and we want damages for people whose properties were damaged.
10 years ago, Congress passed the Clean Air Act requiring gasoline to burn cleaner. The oil companies chose to blend MTBE into gasoline to meet the new standards. One problem, the chemical spreads quickly when mixed into groundwater. which apparently happens all the time with leaky underground storage containers. Almost every state has found MTBE in the groundwater. California has 10,000 contaminated sites. New York has identified some 1,500, 400 of them on Long Island alone.
This will undoubtedly be proven to be the worst single area with MTBE problems affecting drinking water. And the reason is because these people, 3 million of them, don't have any alternative source of water.
Studies are now underway to determine the human health risk. As for who's responsible, the oil companies say their hands were tied.
There's a law out there that requires that reformulated gasoline contains 2% by weight of oxygen. And the only practical alternative that I have in order to comply with that law is that we use MTBE.
Until Congress acts to fix the mess, the problem will be addressed state by state, lawsuit by lawsuit. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, New York.
In the Florida Keys, marine life experts say it could be something in the water, a germ or pollution, that's responsible for the beaching of 75 to 100 bottlenose dolphins. At least 25 have died as rescue teams try to save as many as possible. It is the latest in a series of dolphin beachings off the Atlantic coast. There are new alarms today about nuclear weapons in the Persian Gulf. The CIA declined to comment on a Washington Post report that it can no longer rule out the possibility that Iran has nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, the United Nations is still struggling to keep weapons of mass destruction out of Iraq. Today, the UN named its former chief weapons inspector, Rolf Ekéus of Sweden, to head a new inspection team. Iraq doesn't like that. In Baghdad, Saddam Hussein marked the 9th anniversary of the Gulf War with a defiant speech. He called on Iraqis to stand firm against United Nations sanctions. Saddam said the mother of all battles is still going on. Russia says its offensive against the capital of Chechnya is now in a decisive phase, but Islamic rebels there show no signs of giving up. Russian forces today launched their heaviest air and artillery barrage in weeks. The bombardment has reduced much of Grozny to rubble, but the rebels say their losses have been light and they still have no shortage of food and ammunition. The rebels say civilians are bearing the brunt of the Russian assault, thousands still trapped in the city under almost constant attack. In Guatemala, thousands of villages are under fire from an active volcano. Lava is flowing toward 2 towns, and residents have been told to be ready to evacuate on short notice. On the CBS Health Watch, U.S. health officials have approved a new prescription medicine that may ease symptoms for many people with epilepsy. The anti-seizure drug Trileptal is approved for adults and children. Next on the CBS Evening News, a king legacy and a woman's recipe for success. Martin Luther King dreamed of a day when blacks would have the same opportunity to succeed in this country as whites. That day is getting closer. Black unemployment in 1999 fell to an all-time low, and the number of black-owned businesses has grown 29% in 10 years. Here then from CBS's Anthony Mason, an American success story.
All the macaroni.
In Harlem, Sylvia's restaurant is more than a lunch stop.
Like that, please?
It's a landmark.
We call it Southern style, soul food, and I am a soul sister, all the way.
Sylvia Woods started out picking cotton in South Carolina. Today, her cornbread and collard greens lure tourists from all over the world.
I took some home.
Took some home.
Some spare ribs, yes, and macaroni and cheese.
Suddenly, in this economic boom, Sylvia's is in the middle of a Harlem renaissance.
Not ready.
And at 73, the boss is still cooking.
I want to create. I want to create jobs, create business.
When she bought the little lunch counter in 1962, it had 6 booths and 15 seats. Today, Sylvia's has 200 employees.
It was a luncheonette, and now Sylvia's is a national brand.
Sylvia's son Kenneth has helped put his mom's face in supermarkets all over the country.
Becoming not just a mom and pop, but a major company, you know, there's challenges.
Big challenges. The family's launched a line of hair care products, hopes to build a hotel and convention center in Harlem. There's a second Sylvia's now in Atlanta. But they need more people to make it all happen, and in this tight job market, Sylvia's manager Clarence Cooper says he can't get enough cooks, cashiers, or waiters.
Which takes a special type of talent. Not everyone can be a good waiter.
The ribs are too big.
And not everyone can meet Sylvia's standards.
Soul food is no toy.
The boss wants it done her way.
I hate to say, talk about the men, but you know, you all don't like for women to tell you, don't do it that way, do it this way.
She's still her company's greatest asset and hardest worker.
Nothing stops us. Nothing stops us.
From an old family recipe,
okay,
this soul sister has cooked up a multi-million-dollar business. Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
Progress, but still a long way to go for the dream of equal opportunity. For the CBS Evening News, Dan Rather reporting. Good night.
For news 24 hours a day, CBS.com on the internet and on our interactive partner, America Online, at keyword CBS News.
Elian's fate. The controversy over whether he'll be returned to Cuba is near the boiling point. Will he be made a U.S. citizen? Details tomorrow on the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
Martha Stewart lights up your life tomorrow on The Early Show. Experience CBS News.